It's all for you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End the discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm doing well. I have a special guest with me today. I'm a big advocate of mental health because 2 years ago, I almost took my life because I was in a black period. I just felt like life was just, I had no purpose. I just felt like I was just in that black peace of mind where I just felt like I just wanted to end it. I just want to end it. But through just family and just going to see the therapist and things in this nature that helped me kind of get me out of that, it's a still ongoing struggle. And so I have this excellent guest with me. He's been 20 years in the mental health game, and I'm truly honored to have him on. Also, he's the creator of these flashcards, which is pretty awesome, called Family, Are You All Right? I love that because that's a question that we need to ask our people, like, are you all right? And often we get that thought that we're good, but we're not good. And so I have this awesome brother, James R. Harrison. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic today. How are you feeling?
I'm doing good, man. Before we get into this conversation, man, just give people a little bit of your background a little bit.
Sure thing. So, my name is James Harrison. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, able to see therapy clients here in California as well as in Arizona. My background is actually in music education. So, I did my undergraduate in music and was teaching youth and some adults for a few years. And then I transitioned into mental health, working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals and also working with youth and families in the foster care system, work inside of medication management clinics and schools and different community spaces. So I love being an advocate for our community's mental wellness. And yeah, I want to continue on that path as best I can and bring some folks along too.
And I love your anthem, be compassionate, be courageous, live empowered. Talk
Awesome.
about that. Talk about
Yeah.
that.
So to be compassionate, to be courageous, and to live empowered, I think is in the work that I'm pursuing, and I said the wellness journeys that I'm offering to individuals is being able to continue to define what it means for us to be compassionate with ourselves, knowing that we can be hard on ourselves in the language that we use within ourselves in our self development, but also in development of others that are inside of our communities. So, what does it look like and this is me offering these kinds of questions in sessions, but also with myself. What is it that I'm seeing as being an offering of compassion in this moment? Is it something that I'm conscious of? Is it something that I'm actively inviting for myself? Or is it something else that I'm inviting? Right. And to be courageous is to find the will within self to invite some healthy challenges. So this can be healthy conflict and us questioning things that we may not have questioned before. It could be questioning things that our parents told us. It could be questioning things that are happening in our social environments that allow for us to kind of push against the grain a little bit. It doesn't have to be destructive, and conflict can be a space to be able to observe and to notice. So being courageous is inviting an opportunity for us to see some things from a different perspective Whether or not we decide to actually pursue them is a different story, but we at least want to be able to offer ourselves the opportunity to see what's there. And to live empowered is taking that information, taking that compassionate sense of self, taking that courageous approach, and now living within our purpose, right? So I'm taking all the information that I've learned about myself, I learned about how I react and how I respond, and now moving into this is my action phase. I get to live this and also share that with other individuals in my life, or with children, or who if I work with, or how I want to be showing up in the community. This is what it means to be compassionate, to be courageous, and to live in power.
And also talk about, because I know a lot of people think that we're out of the pandemic, but we're still in the pandemic. So
Mm-hmm.
just as a Black man personally, as a therapist, um, like what you just broke down so beautiful is how that helped you through the pandemic.
Yeah, I had to learn how to move a little bit differently with the shelter in place. I remember, and I think it was in March of last year. Like I was traveling. I went to go see my brother and his fiance for their engagement party, and I remember there kind of being like whispers of something that I needed to pay attention to, and some viral thing was going on. And what was it going to mean for me seeing clients face to face? What was it going to mean for me and the relationships that I was just navigating? But also, just as the year progressed, just seeing the violence that was happening to our people, it was magnified. It wasn't that it wasn't already happening, but it magnified what I was seeing, and I had to really take inventory of how my body was responding to that, how my mind was responding to it, what I was seeing with me and my peers, and also spiritually what's going on for me. So I would say that through all of this, it's really kind of, I don't want to say forced me to, but it's allowed an opportunity for me to see how I can be compassionate with myself and how I do recover from certain stressors. If the stressors are like social media or consuming too much media in some way, or if that is things that I put into my body, or people that I socialize with, all those different things that really did bring some of those engagements, those interactions, those events to the forefront. So it kind of, I think as a Black male, it also brought up how I wanted to continue to identify in spaces. Not that I wasn't showing up as myself. I think there's different ways that we get to show up, and I'm not sure how much your audience or you familiar with just, and I think it's become more of a buzzword recently, is code switching, and what it means for us to show up in certain ways for certain individuals, and for us to show up authentically as ourselves. Like, how are we kind of navigating that, and what does that mean for our sense of community, but also just where we feel safe. And I think that safety was one of those things that was touched on a lot in this last year and so. Is what are the spaces that we are intentionally creating for ourselves that feel safe, and what are the ones that we're participating in somewhat voluntarily way, or a way that's voluntary, that doesn't feel safe for us. And for many people, that was work, in the physical work environment, but also now in certain parts of our communities, with policing and all this kind of stuff. What did that mean for us? So what it means to be in a Black body. So there's a lot that came into question for me over this trajectory of the shelter in place and the pandemic, which is it continues to get shuffled for me to try to understand like what it means for me to stay true to myself and stay true to my purpose in my role as a clinician, because there's different ways that I take care of myself, hearing what's going on for folks, but also things that are going on personally for me.
And also, touch on, I always wonder, like, when it comes to a therapist, like, who do a therapist go to when they have issues? Because often therapists takes the burden of other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to take your emotions out of it, which is
Mm-hmm.
hard because being a human being, it's almost difficult to take that emotion out, and
Yeah.
you carry all those people's burdens, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it kind of hinders you. So who do you go to when you need to
Mm-hmm.
like go to when, like, are you all right? Like, who do you go to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do have a therapist. Like, a therapist go and see therapists. I think that we have to hold space for each other, and we get to vary the way that we're able to engage our healing. Because yes, the therapist can offer certain tools or offer a certain space for us to be able to process parts of our lives. And that's work that we have to do independent of those sessions that we have with our healing partners. So things that I do for myself might include some form of exercise or meditation or breathing or something, or, even going out dancing, or finding some activity that also invites a sense of healing for me, a sense of being something that's nourishing, something that's cleansing, something that's refreshing. And that might even be just like going and taking a bath or going to a spa. When we're thinking about the world being more open, those things were more accessible. But now, when things were dialed back significantly, especially here in California and some other states, then what does that mean for me to start to provide for myself, to take care of myself, things that I know that I can do for me that maybe I was relying on someone else to do for a period of time. Right. So I think that there's a healthy cycle of being able to utilize others. So using a therapist or using a coach or using someone that can help to grow me in ways that I may not be able to see for myself, but also me doing things that I know are good for me consistently. So there's an element of ritual that gets brought into the equation.
And I think that's the most important thing is that the healing process. I think as Black people, is that we haven't healed yet. We still have the trauma of slavery.
Mm.
You go into Reconstruction, you go to everything, and then one of the things that kind of troubled me in that healing process is that the APA reports that 5% of psychiatrists are Black or biracial. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big person on affirmation and representation. And then also the CDC reported that, it rose 73% of among Black youth over the past 30 years, and that's troubling because, again, you look at numbers, but I look at faces. I
Mm-hmm.
was 2 years ago on that verge of committing suicide. Um, so talk about that aspect of, representation and affirmation when it comes to the work that you do.
Mm-hmm. Specifically with representation,
Yeah.
is I say it's growing. I was even having a conversation with a brother this morning about his journey into mental health as a marriage and family therapist, and him being the first in his family, one, to go to college, and then two, to even go to this master's track, and then three, to be somebody in the family who's pursuing a pathway in the healing arts. Right. I think that is it's been challenging for our generation and maybe even generations before. I think it's becoming much more accessible to the generations that are being born, the ones that are coming up, to have access to persons, characters that reflect them in culture. I think it's one thing to have like a physical image of us, but also there's a culture that's within each family that also needs to be or gets to be spoken to. And I think that there's enough of that within certain regions of our country, of this country, to be able to look at how some of those cultures overlap, and where there's and I kind of hesitate to say it in this way, like a culture of trauma, but also a culture of responsiveness and a culture of healing. So there's kind of balancing all of that, and to be able to have someone who's positioned to have those conversations, who's not biased, so, or at least tries to reduce the number of biases that they have inside of those conversations, but is also able to relate to some of those experiences of having to navigate experiences of stress, experience moments of stress, experience these different things that are happening in society that are in lots of ways violent acts, and other acts that are just identifying what healthy is. I don't know that there's a lot of ritual necessarily either. I mean, I think, again, when I say it in that way, there's a growing number of individuals and families and communities that are centering what healing looks like. I think there's a balance of pointing out what's wrong and then being able to say, this is what's going right. Let's continue to build with that, and to maintain an awareness of things that have not been contributing to our wellness overall. So I think that representation is continuing to grow in the mental health field, although it's still very, very low. Like you mentioned, it's only 5% of healers in that space, are either Black or biracial. And we still get to grow them and talk about it and do the work in different communities. I know that there's certain initiatives that are happening across the country to train persons that are in barbershops or in salons or other places where we're likely to have some of those conversations, but at least be able to use some of that as leverage for us to be able to have the conversations that can be healing, so that it's just not staying, it's not stagnant. It's not this stagnant energy that's just kind of sitting with us in those same ways, kind of sweeping something underneath the rug, right? We want to be
Right.
able to lift it up. And one of those places to lift it up might be places that we gather more often to have those conversations. So that representation is, again, is part of our culture. You know, it can include culture, somebody that does understand the struggles, trials, and tribulations we hear often, right? That are
Yeah. Oh,
similar enough among us. And to be able to have a compass for what actually is healthy, because we can always talk about what's wrong, right? But when we say, so if I'm not going to put these things in my body, if I don't want to continue to have these thoughts, what are the thoughts and what are the foods or what are the experiences, persons that I need to surround myself with so that I can go into this next phase of maturation, right? And that's emotionally, psychologically, etc.
and I totally agree with that. But I felt like personally, you have generational trauma and then you have generational responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of going together. So can you kind of talk about that I know we talk about generational trauma, but we never
Mm-hmm.
talk about generational responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like the buck stuck with us. Like our past trauma shouldn't be the next generation past trauma. So how can we
Mm-hmm.
work through that?
That's a that's a decision that gets to be made, I think, as a family. Where I mean, it definitely starts with an individual, right? And then there's a collective of folks that get a chance to have those conversations. I mean, I think that for me, a lot of things come back down to ritual, brother. I think that when we create this rhythm, and rhythm is a part of our culture, right? We can create a rhythm. We create this consistency, this frequency of being able to talk about certain things, and if that is it includes our health, because we're I don't want to stereotype much here. I want to talk about the trends a bit
Right.
and what it looks like for us to gather and talk about TV shows and gather and talking about who's going to be performing whatever concert, or we gather and talk about other things that may or may not be contributing to our health, but we'll spend a lot of time with how much of our time investment. And you mentioned earlier, like just being able to share time as it's a gift, right? So how often are we, or how much investment are we making and talking about this generational healing? Because we can sit down and talk about all the good things that happen on this TV show and it made me laugh and all this kind of great stuff, which is beautiful, right? And then how much time are we also giving to the healing of and identification of things that are going to be healthy for each of the individuals that exist in my household, but also in the community? And what are the strengths that I have that I'm bringing, and what are the things that I know of that I also need to work on, so that it doesn't continue to fester in some way. So I think that I've talked about it a few times, even in this last week, about what that can look like. And sometimes that's, of course, it can start within the house, but also can be block by block. Right? We can't sit back and kind of wait for the government or wait for a city or wait for somebody else to kind of come in and to do that, because they often don't have the intimacy of information that is necessary for a specific family. Yeah, they can do the surveys, and it's not to down what's happening policy wise. I think that doing a policy is one arm of the work, and we have to take on some of that. We get to, and it's not to say that we have to. It would help if we did more, take on that responsibility for ourselves to say, this is what I know that I have the time for. But I think there's enough of the distractions in folks' lives where by the time you're done with work, like, you're exhausted. Like, who has time to go and do fill in the blank things if you have a family, especially, like, then you got, children or multiple children. There's a lot to manage, and to be able to create time, intentional time for our healing. We have to figure out how we're going to be able to prioritize that and how we want to ritualize that in some ways for ourselves where possible, as being able to kind of take inventory of the day and to kind of, again, know ourselves, know how much we're expending, and energy, to say, well, I think that I'm gonna have more energy to do this on the weekend, or have conversations like this during the week, or whatever that thing is, to find that healthy rhythm for us. It can be challenging at times, but I think it's necessary to be able to identify where that's possible, and even if it's just 5 minutes, that we're starting as being able to create a little bit of leverage, something that allows for us to start the conversations.
And I think it's important that we start the conversation. especially at an early age. And when you talk about generational responsibility, talk about your flashcards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit because I think that's a
Yeah.
critical part of that generational responsibility that you took the responsibility to create these flashcards that the whole
Mhm.
family can do,
Yes.
especially kids who can verbally tell you how they're feeling, but if you
Hmm.
put an image to it, it opens up a whole new possibility. So talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think so. I'll do a little bit of the backstory, and I'll show the cards a little bit. Here is I started off my career here in California, working in a system of care that focused on youth and families in the foster care system with a plan to be reunified. So something had happened for the child to be removed from the home, and now they're in a foster care situation, where they're with it could be with a relative caregiver or somebody that's a stranger essentially to them. And the county that I was working in San Francisco, they had mandated using these tools, basically emojis, for children to be able to identify how they were feeling. And of course, the emojis are yellow, and they have the sunglasses and this, that, and
Yeah.
the other. But they really weren't. I mean, not to say that they were bad. As being able to say that there's other tools that can be used that are specific to the populations that they were serving, which were mostly Black and Brown folks. And there weren't any tools at the time to be able to have those conversations with them about. So I decided in the last couple of years to be able to create some tools that would allow for both the representation to be there for them, but also to invite some conversations that can happen, for me as a therapist in the room with a client, but also a tool that can be used, at home or in classrooms or with people who are or students who are clients who are nonverbal, to be able to use the cards as an opportunity to communicate. So the brand is called Family You All Right. It's a flashcard deck. It has 72 cards in it, and it intentionally focuses on and highlights African language as well. So in each of the card decks, you'll find translations of the emotional vocabulary in English and in Kiswahili. And that's just another opportunity for us to expand our identities and language. I'm not expecting for everybody to speak Kiswahili right off the bat. It's just another opportunity for us to expose ourselves to the cultures that are rich and the languages that are rich, and be able to hear these sounds that they also have relevance in other places. So I deal a lot with vibration just based on my music background, right? But some of the images, they are presented in this way. So it has some of the hair texture, and it has the skin tone, and like I said on the back, then it has the English and the Kiswahili. So this one is representative of confident, and then the Kiswahili translation would be uhakika. And the
Right.
translations are really easy for the most part for anybody who has any context or context of Spanish. So all the vowels sound the same as Spanish, and then the consonants are the same. So the prompt cards are similar to this, where it invites people to have some conversations about what they're feeling and when those feelings are present, and maybe what somebody can say. So this one is asking, so when I feel blank, I prefer people to say blank. And if I'm feeling cards, which allows for folks to kind of see and to experience language that can be compassionate in their approach and their kind of fill in the blank offerings, and just maintaining the sense of representation, right? It also comes with a glossary card that has all the emotions on it front and back, with the names both in English and in Kiswahili. So there's two of these. One is in English, and then one is in Kiswahili. And we're going to continue to expand this deck to be able to include other languages, and to offer some more tools. So at the end of this week, or maybe likely the beginning of next week, we'll release the coloring book, which is definitely for younger audiences, to be able to continue to see us and to draw us and to visualize themselves in ways, and offer some of the same prompts and whatnot. So I think that and the means of responsibility is being able to continue to create tools that we know that can be used at home and different spaces, schools, clinics, so that there is that ongoing dialogue, at least opportunity to insert some ritual and having these conversations, whether this is something that, we start our day with or end our day with, or just kind of do check-ins at the middle of the day. Specific with the flashcards, it can be used at any moment. Right? It can be used when you're traveling. It can be used when in the car with kids, kind of hit them to be refocused and somewhere, get ourselves to be grounded in a way that feels good to us.
And I think that's important too, is because especially, we're still in a pandemic and, you got kids going back to school. And I think this is an important tool to use for kids when they come home for school. And again,
Mm-hmm.
if they don't know how to verbalize how their day was school, you bring out these flashcards and you bring it out. You say, hey, all right, show them this. Like, all right, like point out like how were your day at school. And I think
Mm-hmm.
those are important tools. And then also I like how you use, you know, you know, African language into it too, because it gets kids and also parents to understand that we're a global community.
Awesome.
Because usually when we talk about mental health, we usually look through mental health through the dynamic of being a Black in America, but
Mm-hmm.
also it's more than just being Black in America. It's a global perspective. So
Awesome.
I like that idea of doing that. Also, are you going to use other African languages in the flashcards down the road?
Yeah, we're already in the process of trying to include some more. It takes some time to be able to just to curate that and to make sure that the languages and the vocabulary specifically translates in a way that makes sense on both sides. Is sometimes it's interesting to me. I mean, it's worth noting that there are certain words in other languages that just don't translate, and the same kind of vice versa. I think that, I mean, language can be somewhat limiting at times. It really can be more about the gesture and see like the eye shape and the nose, like and mouth, like all this communicates something to us, even when we say the word, happy or excited or exhilarated or any of these things. The expression that comes behind it is really also part of the communication. So I know we noticed that in Kiswahili, there are several words that essentially mean the same thing, but the context is really what makes a difference. So we want to be able to, as we expand the decks, to speak to that, and even also speak to the images that are present, so that people do have that connection that is continuing to be drawn and built, so that there is that representation in both language and also image.
And then also, I forgot the key component too is that also it gets kids and parents interested in learning another language too. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I think in this global economy that we live in, it's important that kids learn multiple languages. That's the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's the other part of me is like, I love that there's an introduction to languages that are spoken more prominently here in the States. I mean, I think that I've noticed that there's often access to Spanish, there's often access to Mandarin, there's often access to languages that are Eurocentric or Asian centric. And then what happens to the African languages? They kind of get brushed to the side. So this is an intentional insertion of our culture and our languages so that people can have and have exposure to it and to get curious about it and to be able to develop also to start thinking along the lines of being empathetic. Because when I see a word in Kiswahili, I can also ask myself, I wonder what kind of, like, if my experience of happiness is similar to their kind of happiness, for them to use this word. There's the same kind of happy around food, because I get excited about food, and we use the same word to be able to describe the feeling that we experience when a food is present. And it might be some other food, like what food is it that they do get excited about, get happy about, or any of those kinds of things can often create a bridge of creativity, of curiosity, and conversation. So it really is, I think it's a beautiful way to be able to start dialogue with our young people, but also with adults, so that we can become curious about each other and to learn about each other.
And I think that's important too. And let's pivot from generational responsibility to generational emotional wealth. Touch on
Hmm.
that.
To emotional well. So it's funny, every once in a while, I say funny, but it's more of an observation. When I'm listening to certain artists and the way that they are speaking to their pain or their struggle, and hearing somebody like Nipsey say that I went through every emotion. Right? And what does that mean for somebody to go through every emotion? When there's often, somebody will say, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm depressed, or I feel this way. What does it mean for us to have a relationship with those emotions? Am I trying to push that emotion away? Am I trying to bring it close? Am I trying to really understand it when it's present? Like how intimate can I be with this feeling that's happening in my body? What do I know that I have to do what can I do to maintain it? Or what am I doing to appease it in some way? All right. So we know when we get hungry, then we can put certain kinds of we can put food in our bodies. But am I asking myself intentionally, is this the kind of food that I know is going to be nourishing for me? In the same way, if I'm interacting with someone or if I'm having a specific thought, is this doesn't have to be the healthiest way for me to think? Is this a healthy way for me to think about myself in this situation? And they get to continue to challenge that. So I think that emotional maturity or emotional competence allows for us to look at a feeling and to observe it as something that passes through us, that we get to experience, and we get to manage it while it's here, but it doesn't mean we have to try to avoid any one particular feeling. So there's a huge spectrum of emotion, a huge spectrum of feeling that we get to experience as human beings. And if we decide that we're not going to feel one, or we don't want to engage with one, we get to ask ourselves, why is that? Is there something that I'm potentially afraid of? Is there something that has happened around that feeling that I no longer want to be able to experience, or something else? So that we can grow through that. So I don't want for us to, and I'm hopeful that when people hear this, they're not making an effort to be or are conscious of afraid of feelings, because even fear is something that we get to notice with ourselves. Like what makes this fear even be a thing for us? Am I fearing loss? Am I fearing, that I'm not capable? Like, is there a sense of confidence? Like, what's there for me? But also, when my feeling is there, what are we doing to maintain it? Like, what about this feeling of exhilaration or joy or satisfaction is contributing to this experience of me wanting to hold on to it? I want for this thing to last forever, right? If I'm not doing that, then what am I wanting to do, right? And I think that this does invite that even in the card deck, is being able to ask ourselves, what did I feel yesterday? What do I feel today? What do I want to feel tomorrow? Or even what I want to feel in this moment? Because that gets to shift for us. I think that emotional maturity specifically allows for us to look at and to respond differently instead of reacting to the emotion. Because somebody steps on my toe and I get angry right away and just want to start doing something violent towards them, compared to, let me see what just happened. What's my relationship with this kind of pain? What's my relationship with this person before I go to 100? Right? Is this going to be in my best interest and our community's best interest when this is going on? So I think that being able to ask ourselves what our relationships are with the spectrum of emotions, and just kind of play with one after the other and look at the seasons of that for ourselves, is something it contributes to an overall healthy individual and a healthy experience for us.
And I think that's important too. And this has been a dope conversation. Before we end the conversation, I want to add religion and faith, because
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people use that as a way to help them through mental health.
Mm-hmm.
That's also an element of generational emotional wealth, but often I see it as being a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last person I talked to last year, Kurt D. Jones, I said, when it comes to faith and religion, it's like Pepto Bismol. When you need it, you go to Pepto Bismol,
Awesome.
which is
Yep.
good, but at the same time, it's about doing the work. So,
Yep.
talk about that. You can use faith to help with that emotional generational wealth
Mm-hmm.
component, but also talk about the aspect of you got to put the work on it. You have to put the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I mean, I have the utmost respect for spirituality and different traditions, especially like indigenous practices and people who decide to practice something that's more prominent across the globe. I think that being able to we all have these different parts of us that we get to use as tools. And I think that spirituality, religion is a tool, in the same way that going to a mechanic or going to the doctor or going to, a nutritionist or whomever, these persons are, not to say that this is all transactional. These get to be parts of our overall growth, development, and sustainability in our lives. So we get to ask ourselves, how is that contributing to, how is the spirit How is the church? How is the mosque? How is the sacred space allowing for me to be fed, or how are we feeding each other in ways that are contributing to this psyche that really does is dependent on being healthy, right? And is this introduction of verses or practices within certain traditions, like how is that contributing to my overall health as I'm moving through these different community spaces, communal spaces? I think that asking ourselves the questions about what those traditions say about spirit or and its relationship to the full body experience is worthwhile. And it's like, is it asking us, I mean, quite literally, is your body a temple? And if it is a temple, like, how am I treating it as such? What kind of things do I bring to the temple? What kind of things do I remove from the temple? Or how does the tradition talk about character and our character development? I think that there's opportunities for us to be able to look at these different traditions and see how the community itself is responding to it, and not just kind of using it as a billboard, so to speak, to have more people in a specific place, is being able to say that this is, we're doing this and it works and it's sustainable and it looks like this. And you can access it too. I think that being able to have those conversations is really important, instead of saying, well, just give it to God. That's one thing. I think that's a beautiful way to be able to release something. And so now that you've released it, there is also responsibility to go and fill up your gas tank. Like, it's not going to fill up by itself, right? You need to, in the same way of getting food, like you want to get it, you have to do what is on the human side of that to be able to make it happen, right? If my gas tank is literally empty, am I going to sit and wait for somebody, or am I going to go out and ask some persons, depending on what my timeline is? But some movement needs to happen in order for us to have our needs to be met. And that need being an emotional need or a psychological need, a social need or spiritual need, like, we get to tap into those places and do that work. So sometimes it is a therapist who has the tools to be able to talk about how we're experiencing our thoughts, or how we're experiencing our bodies, what body of knowledge allows for us to see what's healthy and unhealthy. In the same way that we would go to a doctor to find out more with their expertise, to find out what's going on physically for us, or physiologically for us, to be able to attend to that, or if that's a natural healer, or however folks are identifying, is being able to say, like, who has the tools that are going to help for me to elevate and to be my healthiest self. So, like, I love the idea of being able to incorporate spirituality into people's practices or into their lives. I think it's about having also a healthy community to be able to cultivate that and ask some of those courageous questions too, about what is it that we are doing together for all of us, and not just for one person. I think that can be a healthy emphasis on one person from time to time, but if it's all being one person all the time, then there's an imbalance there, and that's worth noting.
Yeah, man, that's important. I think at the end of the day, I think that you have to take different elements to help you. I mean, you can't just rely on one thing. I mean, you have to rely on everything, from faith to seeing a therapist to your eating habits. Those are important too. So this was an amazing conversation. Anyone that's listening, I hope you utilize these tools and apply it to yourself. James, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. How can people find you?
Absolutely. The best way to get a hold of me is through Instagram, or you can check out the YouTube. Everything is at Fam You All Right. That's FAMYOUALRIGHT. And then for the other Instagram is Courageous Healing Collective INC. The websites are at chcfam.com or famyoualright.com.
Awesome. And then all those links will be in the description below. Again, brother James, thank you for coming on. You're always welcome to come
Thank you.
on. I think this is important. I think this is an ongoing conversation we need to have as a collective, because honestly, when I think of mental health, I look at mental health as a pandemic itself. It's been
Mhm.
slowly killing us for generation and generation,
Mhm.
and now it's
Mhm.
finally becoming to the forefront. And now it's our responsibility to keep this conversation, and then also create resources to help brothers that need it, because
I
it
see.
it literally saved my life.
I feel it. I feel it.
Real,
I'm so glad that you created what you have, so that you can reach more people. I think that's the thing, is that we want to be able to connect with folks and use the talents and use the skills, use our strengths in the ways that we're able to. And I'm proud of you for having this platform and using it to be able to connect us, and for allowing for me to be here. It's a pleasure.
thank you, and we're out, guys. Peace.
Peace.